I'm not a Game of Thrones fan. I think I've only seen up to season 4, so I don't know all the details and all the episodes. But I do know, at least from hearing about it and seeing it on YouTube, a lot of fans did not like season 8, and the ratings reflect that as well. But there is a actress named Carice van Houten who is defending season 8, and I find that interesting. Let's see what she has to say. So, she loved the randomness and clumsiness of the final season of Game of Thrones, and that the writers, knowing how effing great they are, didn't deserve the scary extreme petition to make the final season of the show after fans weren't happy with how it went. And that has probably millions of views, I believe, last I checked. Game of Thrones season 8, yep, I signed it too, because why not? If you can get people to remake something, I'm all... Wow, that's a lot of people. It's almost 2 million people signed it. So, this was the character of Melisandre, the red lady. I can't remember exactly what she did. She was Emmy nominated in season 8. Wow. So she spoke in a Zoom interview to Insider, which is this website, and declared her love for the divisive final season. I loved the ending. I loved the randomness of just picking a king. And I believe the king was Bran, just some guy in a wheelchair who pretty much was being dragged along and became a future-seeing god character. I don't know how that would make for a good character, but kind of having the power of foresight doesn't really make for great storytelling as far as I remember. That's why I loved the first season. The guy who actually was king, Robert Baratheon, didn't want to be king, so he already got a lesson in the beginning. Why are you striving for that sort of power when obviously it doesn't make you happy? Well, I don't think making yourself king makes you happy. Being a king makes you the defender of the land. And Baratheon was just a really good soldier or really good warrior, ended up defeating the previous king, I believe, and realized he wasn't a very good king. He wasn't very good at governing. So that's kind of the idea behind Game of Thrones. There's all these different actors or characters, and they're not the best suited for the job. They all want the power. They just don't know how to use it right. In the events that occurred in Westeros before season 1 started, Robb Baratheon rebelled against the Mad King. Yep. But Baratheon was actually a pretty bad king in Westeros in the end because he came disillusioned with ruling and preferring fighting and rebelling, supposed day-to-day mundanities of becoming a king. So Van Houten compares this unhappiness with that of the eventual king of the Six Kingdoms, Bran, who reluctantly accepted the throne in the Series 8 finale. And I think that was done by Tyrion recommending him because he had the best story, and thus, because he had the best story, the people would accept him, which is odd because there was all sorts of other characters that apparently had better stories, like Jon Snow being one of them. Would be more than a loved king for what he did and all the things he sacrificed. And of course, there's the fan theory that Bran was scheming this whole thing the whole time. And, once you have the power of foresight and all this stuff, it's like, okay, I guess he was doing that. Who knows? Kind of a silly thing to think about. So while Bran's coronation was met with ridicule and rage from large portions of Game of Thrones fans, Van Houten stands by her love for that decision from showrunners D&D. I love the randomness and clunkiness of picking some guy, which is very representative of the world right now as crazy people are ruling the world. I thought it was a great comparison. So now she's saying, hey, crazy people are ruling the world. Can you give some example of what the heck you're talking about? Because I don't think you can compare modern day first world politics to a fantasy setting of a bunch of usurpers trying to fight for King's Landing. It just doesn't... I'd like to see how you're making this connection there, Van Houten. It was inevitable there was going to be those who didn't like the end of the show. You got that right. The fact that some people were so disappointed is because everything before that was so good. Okay, this is what really throws me off. and why I wanted to cover this post. She's admitting, when she says this sentence, that what came before was so good, but season 8 wasn't as good as what came before. So she's admitting lower quality in season 8. So already she's justifying the people she's arguing against. They're just complaining. It's not as good as it was before. Yes, exactly. Not only was it not as good as before, it didn't even come close to as being good. You didn't even tell a proper story. You just completely forgot lore or completely forgot plot lines or threads for the sake of smashing things together and getting it out the door. They could have had more time and money to finish off that. They could have had 6 more episodes. They could have had all this time. And they didn't. Why not? So it feels a bit ungrateful. You know, there's the thing about stories. Some people remember what happens at the end because that's where we learn what the struggle was all about. What did the hero become? What did he achieve? What did he get out of all this sacrifice? Who did he become as a result of all this? What state of the world is left once he sacrificed everything? Who came with him? Who died along the way? And you get a lot of death in Game of Thrones in general. But when you see what happened to all the characters and what it was all worth, was it worth it? Did the audience get the payoff they wanted? I would say no. If there was this much outcry from season 8, not only season 8, I think the previous seasons as well weren't as excellent as they should have been. A lot of plot threads or a lot of storylines just dropped entirely. Some of the Dorne arc, I think, did not work out too well as well. You feel disappointed because you know the writing is good, and then you realize that something's wrong. And who do you blame? You don't blame George R.R. He's the guy who started this all. You blame the guys in charge, who are D&D. You've had such great times, and then you're going to be disappointed because it's not going to go exactly how you anticipated. No, they wanted a good ending to a story. They wanted things to make sense. They wanted characters and lore and the revelation of magic and technology to all make sense. And instead, you get this cluster of nonsense. Of course, you're going to have all sorts of criticisms, and I just thought it was a sign of how good the show was. That does not make sense to me, Miss Van Houten. Yes, you're going to get criticism regardless, even in a good thing, but that is not a sign of how good the show was. The more criticism you get is a pretty good sign. Those are bad things. You can criticize a good thing and nitpick and say, okay, it's not as perfect as it could be, or if it had just this element, or this arc was expanded more, or more exposition here or there. Yeah. But more criticism does not mean better quality writing. It usually means less. People sometimes take it too far and get too personal, but I can't take that seriously. Well, I'm sorry, but we're not professional actors who can just turn things on and off in our heads. We get attached to things. We get attached to other people, fictional stories, ways of living, ways of thinking. It's kind of human nature almost to be comfortable in things you like stories. I just thought it's people being really emotional about this show. Okay, so this I don't grasp. She seems to accept the fact that people can be positive about a show, but not the fact they can't be negative about a show. It's very strange. It just always amazes me how people can go behind their computers and just type die, B word, die. I'm fascinated by that human psyche. Maybe because they're so emotional, they can't believe how crappy the story became. Or how much they hated the various bad or villainous-like characters who happen to be female in that story. That seems pretty natural reaction to dislike the villains. Obviously, doing that in a serious tone on Twitter is kind of silly. It shows you how lack of maturity you possess, how lack of control you have in expressing your fandom, but it's also to be expected. So she's talking about people deserving a final season that makes sense, and she's saying, that's beyond fandom, that's extremism, that's scary. Knowing the writers and knowing how effing great they are, they don't deserve that. Well, the problem is, in season 8, they weren't effing good. And the quality of writing was decreasing as each episode went by. I think there were only 6 episodes. They were like 2 hours long, what have you. When that is happening, there are fundamental problems in writing that got overlooked. And that is how to end a series, how to get the payoff, how to get the resolution of plots, how to get a proper denouement or resolution of the rest of the side characters, the secondary storylines, the state of the world, the ethics, the morals that were taught. Those are the things you need. You need to have like all the factions, all the characters, all their details revealed. What happens to these people? What happens to King's Landing or what have you? If that's not done right, then everything seems like one big waste of time. And that's not just for TV, that's for any story. And you're talking about large books or large series or trilogies or whatever you want to call them. If you end poorly, everything feels like it was a waste. No matter how great your writers are, if they can't hit the landing in an Olympic event, they say that you hit the landing. Doesn't matter how complicated your routine was. If you hit the landing, that's what counts. Because if you fall on your ass at the landing, you're not going to be in the top 3. I think they are probably cool enough to deal with that, but still, they are human beings. They are trying to make a good product, and they failed. You may have all the love in the world for these guys who gave you a job and did this for 7 or 8 years or whatever it was, but they screwed it up. Every fan I've ever heard, whether it's written or on YouTube or just talked about in person, knows they screwed it up. It doesn't take an English major to figure this out. So I don't know if this person studied storytelling or just studied theater, but clearly she's not listening to criticism. Now, apparently Melisandre had one of the best endings of any character in the season, and her surprise appearance in episode 3, The Long Night, was a fitting end to a character that was searching for redemption after serving the majority of the show as a villain. Okay, that's nice to know. I have no idea how she died, but I heard that she just died. She walks off and just dies. Old age? I don't know. Apparently she was an immortal or a really long-living servant of the Lord of Light. And then she just walks off and I don't know how. She just falls down and dies. I don't know. Very strange. Is that part of magic in the world? Is magic coming back and causing beings like her to just expire? Did she die of old age? Like what happened? I loved my arc. I did get the turn of the character. At some point, her whole world starts falling apart, and that was my favorite moment up till then. It was fun to play someone who is so confident, but it's not my forte. Okay. Etc., etc. So she had some pretty epic lines. She loved her roles. Okay, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what she has to say. She had great scenes. She brought Jon Snow back to life, but that's pretty much it. She does not understand why people are reacting the way they were. And I can't grasp this. This has to be a bias. This has to be a bias toward D&D. I can't. If you are an actor, you know how good you can act and you know how bad you can act. And if you think the acting and the lines that were delivered in season 8 were good, fine. Okay. But if you can't listen to criticism, if you can't realize this is a worldwide phenomenon that everyone was very sensitive over and was watching very diligently, and if you can't hear those criticisms, you have no business saying the things you're saying. You know, you're praising the one thing, the positive emotion, all the good stuff that happened throughout half of the series, but you can't accept the fact that some people didn't like the entirety of season 8. It is, I don't know. Again, this happens a lot with people who are defending things. They only see the positive. They can't grasp the negative. They can't see the logic. They can't see the lore or the breaks in lore. They can't see characters forgetting their plots or losing their minds or becoming different characters on the fly. It's as if they've never studied English, and yet they're actors. So hard to say with people like this who are ensconced in this world. They are bought and paid, of course. They are pro this thing that they're arguing for. But if they can't accept and understand the criticisms of the other side, their opinion is worthless. These are not people to be listened to. You want people who can see both sides of an argument and can critically analyze both and see where they're coming from. Sadly, she is not one of them. And I don't know, maybe she's defending herself. Maybe some of the criticism does ring true to her, and she just can't accept it. Hard to say. Anyway, thanks for listening. Have yourself a great evening.